Pros and cons.
Welcome to Pros and Cons, Engagement Unplugged. I'm Laura Smith.
And I'm Brian Rowley.
Today we're talking about a generation that seems to inspire a lot of workplace opinions, Gen Z. Depending on who you ask, Gen Z employees are ambitious and adaptable, or they're difficult to manage, quick to leave, and unwilling to pay their dues. So the question is Gen Z genuinely harder to lead and retain, or are they pushing marketing teams to rethink what strong workplace culture should look like? An interesting topic.
It is an interesting topic, but before we actually jump into the bigger workplace question, let's actually start by admitting our own assumptions. Like every generation seems to have strong feelings about the generation that comes after it. But what I guess, Laura, is one stereotype about Gen Z at work that you've heard repeatedly?
That they're not motivated. And I read that 62% of HR managers say that Gen Z is their toughest group to motivate. So I feel like that's valid because I don't think it's lazy. It's just they're not motivated to continue to do their job and grow and excel and maybe manage to the expectations that are set for them.
I know we could start here. I mean, because quite honestly, like as I look at that, I'm like, is it that they're not motivated or are they just motivated in different ways? I think this is the part for me with these conversations, because when we were doing this, there are a lot of stereotypes that exist around Gen Z. And I have to be honest, I don't know that I agree with a lot of them. I think it's just we've become a culture in general, a work culture in general, that I think has to adapt to these different generations. And I don't think we as leaders in businesses do a really good job of doing that. So for me, it's like, I don't know that they're any lazier or less motivated as much as it is like, we just have to change the way we motivate these people.
Well, I think, yeah, and there's a lot of research to say. I mean, the times have changed clearly. So from like, Brian, like from when we started our careers, obviously you before mine.
I'm glad you get that every opportunity
every time. Every time.
Just
in case anyone's wondering that I'm...
For those of you who are listening, she's going to poke at my age one more time. Go ahead.
Anyway, it just was a different environment, right? So like what did ambition look like when you started out your career?
Well, I think at that point it was about you work 24/7. Like that really proved that you were like motivated and, loyal to the company and you were doing all those things. And I would look at that and say, but was that even healthy? And what did that prove? Like there's nothing worse for me managing people than having someone who comes in and says, I worked until 11 o'clock last night. And you're like, well, your job doesn't really require that. So are you really doing your job to the best of its ability? Are you prioritizing your work the correct way? Are you, time allocation? All of those things are the things that for me, I don't look at that and say, oh, well, that's an ambitious person because they worked until 11 o'clock. I'm like, what were you doing?
But when we were climbing the ladder, that was what it was. It was working longer meant working harder. And so there was constant expectations around, being seen in the office, working super late nights, working around the clock. And it was all about climb. Like, how do we climb that ladder and make more money? Yeah. And now Gen Z does not. Like, they value the work-life balance, the mental health, the values of the company so much more than pay and their title. So I just think culturally, that's shifted, and you still have managers and leaders in positions like us that come from a very different place. So it's that shift in that mindset that has to adjust as well to the different generations. Because, this generation, it's interesting because we don't have anyone on our team in this Gen Z group.
No.
But in my previous job, plenty of them. And I think... It used to be like, this used to be the whole, I don't know when I was probably whenever, I don't know, late 20s maybe, and I was in advertising. And I remember I started having millennials work for me. And so I'm obviously not a millennial. And so it was like new. And it was very different because I was like high expectations, no one cries at baseball. Like you just work hard, you just deal with what's set for you. And the millennials weren't adjusting to that. They were like, what? That's like scary. And I don't want to be here all the time. And I remember my boss at the time, like stuck an article on my office wall that was like how to manage millennials, because it was like such an adjustment.
Yeah.
So I think I remember that. So it's probably no different than it is now for people managing Gen Z, because it's an adjustment from the Gen X's or boomers or whoever, whoever's managing and leading right now.
Yeah, I think one thing that's actually interesting about the labels for this one, which it's funny, when we were doing some of the prep for this, it came up and I was like, oh, Laura and I struggle on this one. And that was just needing constant feedback and actually validation. And that's not either you or me. That's not our strengths, right? Like when we look at this, that is, if you're looking for that, we are the wrong place. And it's not that we don't appreciate the work that's actually being done. It's just that, pat on the back constantly and all that stuff. Like we've got a lot going on, right? And so it's like finding time to be able to do that. Not that I don't think that we don't recognize the successes of the team. It's just that constant need for that reassurance is not a strength that you and I, either one of us, have, if we're being honest.
Right. 100%. And I think that is, we always say feedback is a gift, but constructive feedback.
You say feedback is a gift.
Well,
now I say it. Yes.
But I feel like it's, we tend to be more on that constructive feedback side, because again, it's where we came from. It's like I learned my best bosses were people who put the pressure on and led by example, but I was respected so much. But then I also, build a rapport with them too. Like, it's like, how do you, and I just think it's different. It's like some people just want to be friends with their managers, and it's like, there has to be a balance. Yeah. And I think and again, it's just like when different generations are managing to each other, it's a dynamic that needs to be addressed. And I think there are some of these perceptions around Gen Z, and there are. I mean, the data shows that there's truth in what their priorities are, or what they're lacking, or what their strengths are. So how much are people paying attention to that, though, in the workforce to tend to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've done, honestly, I think this generation has done a really good job of helping set work-life balance. And I think that, I think
millennials started that for sure.
For sure. But I think Gen Z took it to a whole other level, right? Like, yeah. I mean, we have, and we've seen this, we've all worked with people who, it's literally like 5 o'clock, I'm done. And I've got something to do tonight. Now, a lot of them will pick stuff up after they're done with that, but whatever it was that was taking them away from work at that time is the priority. And then this will come back as a priority later. But I think that they've done a nice job of not saying that, you can only be productive between 8 and 5, and that's the time that work gets done. I think they have said, and maybe it's because, they've seen people. I mean, how many people do you work with that have sort of, and this is a whole other conversation, so I'm not saying right or wrong, but how many people have prioritized their career over raising their children and missed those? Like, there's only one opportunity for your kid to walk. There's only one opportunity and how many people missed that because they were trying to balance their life and are actually regret that in their life as they move forward. I don't think this generation will allow that to happen, because that is the most important point at that point in time. And I do give them credit for that. I think that was important.
Yeah. I think the one thing that they are criticized for is changing jobs quickly. So bouncing around a bit. And it's interesting because it's, are they loyal? Like the conversation around like, is the company loyal to them? Are they loyal to the company? So I think the concept of loyalty comes into play, and it's discussed a lot. So like, what are your thoughts on that, Brian, as far as like, should the company be loyal? Is that a reasonable expectation? Should the employee be loyal, to at whatever extent? Like, where's your head at?
Well, I've worked for some larger corporations, and I think my point of view on this, sorry, I just had a moment there, but my point of view on this is actually a little bit different, because, and I would say this, I'll tell you this, and then I'll answer the question. But at one point in my career, some of the best advice that was ever given to me was, I was working for Verizon, and one of my mentors there had said, don't ever be more loyal to someone than they are to you. And I think that's a really valuable piece of information. It doesn't matter whether it's your career, it doesn't matter whether it's a relationship that you're in, it doesn't matter who you're doing business with. Understand and know the level of loyalty that you're up against. And then you know the game that you're playing. And then you adjust accordingly. Because if someone is not going to be loyal to me, why am I going to give up all those important moments in my life that really matter for them when in the reverse, they could just turn around? Verizon's a perfect example. We used to wake up every 6 months wondering if today was the day that the hammer was going to drop and you would be without a job. And that happened on a rotation on a regular basis. And I think, so the concept, and I can remember when that first started happening in my world and in my career, my dad just couldn't grasp that, because from his generation, loyalty to a company was like the most important thing that you could, you could show or you could exhibit. And for me, it became less and less important because companies weren't being that same in return. Yeah,
because I think loyalty back then was tied to tenure.
Yes.
Right. So if you stayed at a company really long, your seniority, all of that was tied to that. And now it gets earned through impact and growth more so than any years you're served. So the mindset of like, I'm here longer, I shouldn't ever have an opportunity to be, laid off or be at risk, is like, if you're delivering, it doesn't matter how long you're there. Right. And that's just a shift of, I think, of the way business is done now. So the newer generation, I think, the junior generations, I think, are thinking more about, okay, I'll be loyal to you if you're loyal to me. But again, their loyalty is not tied to tenure. Their loyalty is tied to like opportunity, where they see growth, where they see their culture that fits them, the values are aligned, things like that. And loyalty is just a different thing than it was when our parents worked places for 25 plus years.
Or even us. Yeah. I mean, I look at, my husband, Joe, he's been with the same company for 30 years. That's unheard of. I can't even imagine. I was at my last company for 9 and I couldn't even believe that was the case, because it was like, that's long. Yeah.
But I don't know. It's hard now because, are you continuing to be challenged? And I don't know.
I think that's the answer, though.
It's a whole other probably conversation about that.
But I think that is sort of the answer, that I think some people, and especially in this generation, I don't think they look at it as, are you providing me the opportunity that allows me to be challenged every day, get up and do the job that I do for a company that I believe in, that stands for the things that I stand for. That's a really important message versus someone who gets up every day, and this goes back to prior generations, right? Where it was like, I got up, I didn't necessarily believe in the company, but I'd been there for 5 years. So now I need to be there for 9 years or 10 years or 11 years, right? I'm miserable at what I do. I'm not overly appreciated for the work that I do, but yet I'm going to stay there. Like, does that make that any better? I don't think so.
Right. No. And I think now this, Gen Z is, they'll just put their foot down. Like if they feel like their growth is stalled, then they're going to leave. If they feel like the culture and flexibility are like not working for them, and that's like, those are deal breakers. And I think, you've read about it. It's like burnout in management is like a thing for them too. I think if they have the wrong management style that they're working for, and they feel burnt out. Now, again, I think burnt out can be defined differently. Obviously, like we talked about, like when we were early in our careers, truly burnout was like a thing because no one can work that much, but we did. So I think they're just, I don't want to say pickier because it almost has a negative connotation. It's like they just have expectations that they're not going to lower in certain areas for a company to run their life.
Yeah.
And I respect that. It's just, it is as a manager, and we have to, at least I can admit it, like it is hard when you manage people that don't take it as seriously, I think, or as, I don't know how to describe it, as like ambitiously, because ambitious is a thing, right? You want everyone to be ambitious because you want everyone to love their job and do better for the company, and then in turn their career, right? Like you kind of continue to grow. So if you just kind of see, like it's a difference between a career and a job. So knowing that we take, the company and what we're doing very seriously, and it's really important. And I view this as my career, and I always have. When you have someone that works for you that looks at it as a job, it's just hard to manage because the expectation is you're here to build a career, not just to collect a paycheck and run home and at 5 o'clock and forget about us, not to say you need to be on at night, but it's like, this should be an important part of your life.
I would say the one thing that I do struggle with a little bit, and I know this is even in the interview process, when I see a lot of job jumping, that always for me continues to be a red flag. And whether it is or should be is a different question, but it always is. It's still, and I know even when, we present candidates to our leadership team to say, this is someone who I think we're going to move forward with. That's one of the first things that people always ask. What are your thoughts there?
But I think I've had to say this to you before during the process of interviewing. It's like, if you look at the numbers and how often Gen Z, like people are switching jobs. So this is just the old school mindset doesn't carry through anymore, because that's what we, and again, I definitely pause too, because I'm like, okay, these people having opportunities that don't make sense for them? Are they taking proactive, steps? Are they just going, a lot of startups that like don't start up? And so there's a lot of like getting laid off. There has to be context there, but we know millennials and Gen Zs, Gen Z mostly, like they have a high turnover rate. They're just not going to stay at a company super long. So we have to expect to see that to some degree and not get caught up in the old school mindset.
Yeah, I think, for me anyways, I think, the reasons for movement are also really important, and understanding that. And I always, what I don't like is I don't like the movement that's sort of out of the blue and catches you off guard. And I think if you have a good relationship and you establish a team where obviously feedback is a gift, and you take advantage of that by having regular touch points to understand, like, what are your objectives? Where are you trying to get to? What are the goals that you have as an individual? And quite honestly, if the company that they're working for cannot deliver that, I'd be the first one to help them go find something else, right? Because you wouldn't want to be also someone who stands in the way of someone being able to do what they want to do. That said, I think there's a responsibility to be honest about that back to the employer. If you're having those conversations with someone and you're willing to have the discussion around, hey, what are you trying to achieve? Where do you want to go? All of those things for career development for them to be honest in return about, hey, I want to be here by this time frame or here by this time. At least then you can say that's realistic or unrealistic and plan accordingly on both sides.
Yeah, I think those right. Like if you give the opportunity to have the open forum and have the discussion, then people should take advantage of that. And doesn't mean that they're going to get what they want. It just means like we can't read minds. And if there are things that you feel would be more fulfilling for you in your role, then let us know. And we can say that if that's, if we can meet those expectations or not, and let them make that decision. But I do think there's a lot of probably, and I guess it depends, but more bitching in the background than there is having those true conversations. Because I think it's easier for people don't want to confront some of those situations. And maybe Gen Z does it more often because they have such passion about certain areas that are really important to them. But I think traditionally, you don't have a lot of overly high demand type people. At least I haven't experienced to the point where it's like, it's okay, you want that, let me know that, and then let's see if we can fulfill upon it. I think people come with, looking for opportunities, but I don't think it's always, are they always being honest, I guess.
Yeah. How about self-awareness? Do you think, I look at it and would say...
I'm like, that's like a whole other session.
No, I know, but
Beyond Gen Z.
But I would say that, I think millennials are a little less self-aware than I think they are in the Gen Z world. I think Gen Z is more accepting of this is what I want, this is how I get there. Whereas I think the millennial generation is... I don't think they're as self-aware.
Interesting. I feel like there's so many people that aren't self-aware that across all generations. I feel like I identify way too many of them. I'm like, man, that person's not self-aware.
All right, that's a whole other conversation. That's a whole other day.
We need a therapist in the room for that one because I feel like it's a thing.
Talk about... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, I talked a little bit, thank you. We talked a little bit about feedback and reassurance. So again, that's not our strength. So for folks that might be listening to this, that's not their strength. How do you overcome that? Do you make the effort to do that reassurance, or how do you balance that? Because that is a big part of Gen Z. Like that reassurance is an important piece.
Right. And I think some people say it's like entitlement or, is it about the expectations? I think it probably has to do a bit more with like that, the inconsistent management piece. I think the management, who manages the style of their managers is so important to them that I think that you need to be able to bend to giving them what they, like if they're getting it in whatever format, I think they're fine. I don't think they're asking for more. It's just a matter of like how they having consistent managers that are giving the feedback. And if they're not, then they're going to be looking for it and they're asking for it. So I think we know we're not great at it, but that's, step one is acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And knowing that, and again, like I said, we don't have any Gen Z. It's not to say millennials aren't also similar with feedback, because I think we've kind of heard that too from millennials, that you need to have some of that positive recognition. And I think, I want to say now I feel like we're giving ourselves a bad image, because we do give positive recognition. We thank the team. Yes. We like everything the team is, we make sure the team feels. It's just more of that ongoing sometimes, which is, in the thick of things, it's like you forget to pause to say, oh, great work, versus just like, keep that going.
And I think the other side to that too is there are not two bigger advocates for our team than the two of us.
Right.
But that doesn't always come across, right? They don't always get to see that. But I mean, we know what we advocate for and make sure that the team is, taken, that we try to balance their work and understand what the expectations are of them and all that stuff. They don't get the opportunity to see a lot of that. So I guess, just being probably more transparent in those areas are probably things that could definitely be beneficial for someone managing this audience.
Yeah. So it's obviously we've talked about AI, right? So like clearly they're in the thick of it. They kind of grew up with it, to some degree. I mean, the older generation the older end of the generation that's working, obviously in school, college. So do you think that they're comfortable with it, or do you think that they're too dependent on it? Like, where do you think as they enter the workforce they'll sit?
I would say that it's probably more of their life, and it just becomes second nature to them. I don't know. It's interesting on this one, because I actually is there an advantage for them for doing it? Well, I guess, but at the same time, we've had this conversation about AI a million times, right? In the past year, we continue to go through it. There's a certain level of capabilities that AI allows marketers to achieve, and do that at a faster pace. But there's that need to understand the business. There's the need to understand the marketing roles and functions. And there's an incredible level of importance that needs to make sure that whatever work you're doing from a marketing perspective becomes authentic, right? And is authentic and not forced through an AI model. So I think there's an advantage in terms of them being able to prioritize work better through using AI and AI models. But the actual output of their work is still very dependent upon their individual skills and their abilities to be able to understand what is relevant, and what will resonate with the audience that they're having conversations with.
Yeah, I think they're just going to be super users, to be honest. I think they're just going to have it. That's, to me, they're entering the workforce. They've used it in school. They probably, again, I always say the younger generations that work on teams, those, I learn from them so much more because they know the newest, the latest, the greatest. They're up and up on all the newest stuff. I mean, obviously there's controversy around is it going to remove their jobs because they're administrative? Well, to your point, not necessarily. I think, again, they're going to come into the workforce and have a leg up on, and depending on, thinking about engineers, for example, they're really going to have a leg up because they're learning that while they're being educated. So then they're, coming, whereas people in the workforce have to learn it while still doing their regular job, right? And kind of figuring out how to navigate. So yeah, I think they'll come in being super users, and teaching those that are around them, above, beside, below, whatever.
And I think those that are in the workforce already and have the opportunity to work with Gen Zs in regards to this particular topic, I mean, I would have the desk right next to them and trying to learn as much as I possibly could, because it is, it's a reality. It's those that actually who are willing to embrace AI or those that are going to be left behind. It is as simple as that. I don't think that conversation goes much further.
Right. Okay. Which marketing fundamentals should every early career employee still learn without AI?
I think understanding audiences and understanding the people that they're talking to, making sure they've got a good grasp on the market they're serving and whatever AI materials that they're generating that may be putting into that conversation, having a good understanding of that before they start crafting with AI, I think is going to be important. How about you?
Okay. I think we talked about this similar question before in one of our chats, but I go back to curiosity, just being curious, because however that means, like however you dig in, whether you're using AI or not using AI, just like dig in and be curious about the business, about the audiences, to your point, about the products, about all the different departments that are in the company, not just the one they're sitting in. I mean, the best thing is like if you ask, a million questions, you're just going to learn more. So just that curiosity piece would be, regardless of generation really, but I think someone starting out their career, that's super important.
Yeah, I think being humble too, like that's a big one. We see a lot of people that aren't. and it's one of those things where, I mean, we all talk to them, right? We've had people who have been on, this show who we've talked to that might be, potential guests. And we've been like, I don't think that's a fit. But I think
I'm like, what are you saying? Yes, I get what you're saying.
No,
yes.
being humble. Like at the end of the day, we can all learn from each other. It doesn't matter what your title is within an organization, how old you are, like what role you're playing. Like we all have the ability to learn from each other, and we shouldn't lose sight of that.
Okay. Well, I think this was a good discussion.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is an interesting one. We could go on and on and on and tackle like each of the generations. But I think important here is just, I mean, there are some stereotypes that are out there, obviously, that people need to work with. But I also think that as leaders within businesses, we should understand the generation itself and figure out like, how do we need to adjust? Like they might not be the problem, we might be the problem. And going into it with that expectation of trying to understand that, I think is beneficial for everybody. I think this is a great conversation.
So thanks everyone for listening. And most importantly, if you like what you heard today, be sure to follow us.